So appreciate everyone jumping on.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Really excited. I've had a lot of fun today popping in and out of the sessions. Hopefully they've been beneficial for you. Kind of cool to do another virtual conference. I mean, it's fun to see the way these things come together. So, really enjoying that. And again, hope you guys have had a good day. This is a special session. I think you're going to get a lot out of this. We met as a group earlier yesterday and kind of talked through the format here. So let me give you a rundown on what the CISO panel is all about and kind of what the goals are for today. So today really is all about just sharing information and sharing knowledge. We've got a panel of I'll call them experts. We've got a panel of some very experienced folks that are going to talk about some questions today on different things. And so we're going to get into that. I'm going to moderate. I'm just the talking head for today. So nothing really important about me. I've been in cybersecurity for about 25 years. I'm an Air Force guy by trade. I did 22 years in the Air Force and have been working in the private sector, partnering pretty close with Abacode, which is a managed cybersecurity and event sponsor of today's event. So thanks to Abacode for sponsoring. Thanks to all of our sponsors for today's event. So let me give you a rundown of the format and the panel members for today. Let's jump to the next slide. Cool, so we'll jump right into the questions here, but let me just give you a little bit of intro on these guys. Again, it's a fairly impressive group. So on the panel today, we've got John Berger. John is the CISO at ReliaQuest. John is a retired Army colonel, and he serves as the Chief Information Security and Vice President of IT Infrastructure at ReliaQuest. Prior to joining ReliaQuest, he served for 27 years in multiple assignments, including the CISO at United States Central Command from 2010 to 2012. So John's got quite a bit of experience, a lot of operational experience, and leading a pretty high-powered team there at ReliaQuest. They continue to grow, and I think he's going to be looking at folks this year. So we've also got Guy Albertini. Guy is a certified information system security professional and certified intrusion analyst. He has over 35 years of successful experience in IT and cybersecurity. He is the Information Security Officer at Palm Beach State College and President of G-Sharp Security, LLC. He also serves on the CrowdStrike Global Customer Advisory Board and participates in the United States Marine Corps Cyber Auxiliary Program. Guy, thanks for being with us today. We also have Michael Phillips. Michael is a co-founder of VSec. He serves as a virtual Chief Information Security Officer. He is also the owner of Luminate Group, LLC, where he specializes in his vCISO services. Michael is a former Executive Vice President, CISO, and Data Privacy Officer at Rosenthal Collins Group. He served as Assistant Vice President and Information Security Officer of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago and Director of Information Security for the Americas with UBS, a global investment bank providing financial services in over 50 countries. He's also an adjunct professor at DePaul University and holds the certified CISO, CISSP, CISA, and NSA IAM certifications. Michael, thanks for being with us today. We also have Barry Kortekas. Barry is the EVP of Information Security in the CISO for Morgan & Morgan. Barry's an accomplished information security leader with over 20 years of experience helping public, private, and government organizations protect their most valuable information assets. He's built successful and effective teams and helped reduce information risk exposure for numerous organizations over his career. He's lived in Tampa Bay for almost 30 years, and he enjoys walking, cycling, yoga, and reads quite a bit. Barry, thanks for being here. And lastly, we have Jon Sargent. John is the SVP and Head of Cloud Operations for Truist Financial, which I think is now the largest regional bank in the world or in the country. John, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Sixth largest U.S. bank.
Sixth largest U.S. bank. Very cool. So John is a global IT executive transforming business processes and beating strategic targets through innovative IT solutions. He's got extensive leadership experience in both IT governance and business development, and he's aligned IT initiatives with global business development efforts at the C-level for about two and a half decades. John's managed multi-million-dollar projects and SaaS initiatives for Fortune 500 clients. He's got certificates as an Executive Chief Information Officer and a Federal Chief Information Officer. So that's a lot. That's our panel for today. So as I said, a pretty extensive group. I don't know if you can virtually applause or send emojis or something, but have a virtual round of applause for our panelists today. Thanks, guys, for being here. Okay, let's dive into the meat. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to go to our first question. the first question for today, and again, today is just kind of a real talk session. We're just looking at, have a conversation and exchange some ideas. Please feel free to participate in the chat if something strikes you or something resonates. But guys, first question, what are you looking for today when you bring on cybersecurity professionals within your teams?
Thank you for that question, Mike. What I'm looking for is three things, essentially. I'm looking for an understanding of risk, and that's cyber risk, not project management risk or not any other type of risk. I find that even though when people are from IT, there is somewhat of a lack of understanding of what cyber risk is. And so when you're working in security, you really need to understand you need to have a good understanding of what cyber risk is, because everything that you do is going to be based on that understanding. So once you have that, that's great. And the ability to be able to actually understand it. The other one is that fire in the belly, that passion. There's a lot going on in cybersecurity. There's a lot of good days and there's a lot of bad days. And you don't have that passion, you can get burnt out easily. So I look for people with that passion to say, yeah, this is what I'd like to do. And the other one is, I'm looking for skills from another area. So security is great, but when you can combine that with something else, so let's say something with networking or development or anything else that you can combine security with, I think that brings the extra element that is often needed in this industry.
Yeah, I completely agree. Excellent comments. I mean, the whole control environments and all of the control structures we put in place should all be driven by, informed by risk. So yeah, completely agree. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments on the question?
Yeah, I completely agree with Guy on the fire in the belly. The rest of the stuff can be learned, but somebody who's got a drive to be there, to complete, to work hard, to learn new things constantly, because this environment changes so fast. If you're not committed to being on top of it all the time, it's going to be difficult to be a top performer in cloud security or any security space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think underlying that, I mean, I have a great opportunity being a professor at the university. I get to see up and coming talent and people who have a lot of passion. I'm always looking for someone who's curious, who's always asking that next question, who kind of jumps out in front of everything before we even get to that part of the presentation. They're inquisitive, just systems analysts, at their core, they want to take things apart. They want to understand why it's happening, and they want to, take it apart and put it back together so that it actually works better. The other thing I look for are team players, and let me give some context that in graduate school, they get a lot of type A's and they bring us all together. And in the end, it's just capstone, and just watching all these groups implode because the type A's can't get along. I mean, that's exactly what we're kind of looking for in the teams that we build out, are people who understand that they're very good at something. Someone else may not be as good as they are in that area, but the team collectively comes together and leverages the strengths of one another. And in the end, what we're doing is we're working as a collective group and achieving things together. And lastly, just don't be a jerk. I mean, I can't emphasize this enough. CISOs talk to one another. We have a very close-knit CISO organization, particularly here in the Midwest, and we all get on the phone, we talk to each other, and if some really great analyst, architect, is just going from position to position to position for the money, we all know who you are, we know what you're doing, we know what you're good at, we know what you're not. So I would just suggest, just know that other folks are looking at you as you're coming up through the ranks, and you're probably going to get observed to be, exceptional or just exceptional.
Great. Yeah, that's great comments, Michael. Completely agree. John and Barry, so from fire in the belly, from a leadership standpoint, right? What's important there to maintain folks and help them kind of maintain that fire in their belly, and what does that look like day to day?
Sure. Yeah. Day to day, I think for me anyway, it starts with this desire. A desire, I start my day, and really the first hour of my day is all about reading. Whatever it is for you, that's okay. But what I'm looking for when I build my team is people who have that same desire. It's great, if we're going to be security engineers, certainly we need to know about the latest vulnerabilities that are out there. And I'm not discounting that. What I'm saying is, if I'm in the legal industry, it's great if I'm looking at how other things in the legal industry might affect security. Or, if I'm in government and certain things are happening in the government space, by reading outside of my primary discipline, it brings an awareness to other things that are going on. And it makes, in my opinion, for a more rounded security professional.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, we at Rollicos, we hire for attitude, energy, effort. Our philosophy on that is that effort is what really distinguishes, mediocre from good and good from great at the end of the day. And we hire for intangibles. I love the curious one. I like Mike Phillips on collaborative, right? And being a team player. So if I were to summarize them, it would be kind of this curious, collaborative. The one that we didn't mention was humble. I find that people are very open-minded, are very humble, and they're also very collaborative. And the last thing, and I kind of talked about effort, but hardworking, right? At the end of the day, effort is what in our minds really distinguishes, mediocre from good and or great. So those are they're all intangible. So you didn't hear anything about specific skills here. Obviously, they have to have an aptitude, right? But at the end of the day, we can teach folks that. It's the intangibles that I look for, and I think most of the other leaders are saying the same thing. They're just saying it in slightly different language and words. Over.
Yeah, that's great. It means the recipe is the same. The ingredients are in the recipe are the same. They come together a little bit differently, but everybody's looking for pretty much the same thing. Which as a team player, somebody that's a thinker that's going to be looking to solve problems, which we're presented with all the time. And then to Barry's point, you've got to be keeping up to speed with everything so rapidly changing under our feet. So you got to be reading all the time. You've got to be smart, and you've got to be seeking that out. So you got to have initiative too. So great input, fellas. Let's move to the next question. Okay, so along those lines, then, now as we dive a little bit deeper into kind of our own personal development and professional development. Today's a big part of that, workforce development. So how do you ensure your staffs and yourself stay abreast of those latest trends and technologies, those things that are driving how we approach our day-to-day business, our operations, and those services that we're providing to our businesses to deliver the value?
Yeah, this one is so tied to the first question. As I'm building the team, I'm looking for people who have that motivation to take this on themselves, right? So gone are the days when you could just deflect and say, hey, my career is not my own. Your career is your own, and you own it. And, I'm looking for people who understand that, to help people with that. Certainly offering the opportunity to learn is huge. Some of the OGs here in the audience, there was a time when you came on as a security professional and, you got to go to a Microsoft conference, and that's how it was. Those days are gone, and there is so much opportunity out there for all of us to learn in ways that we couldn't have even imagined when some of us started. And so just encouraging that, as a CISO, I'm in a unique spot that I can help in some ways financially. Right. So as I build the teams and I say, okay, our goals for this year include making sure that we professionally, we achieve these things, whatever they are. And again, I am not necessarily saying we can only try to promote people in security space. Overall, I want to make sure that we have people who are well-rounded in several different disciplines. So just being the encourager, and sometimes just being the listener, right? Trying to understand what my team is interested in and what they're good at. I certainly don't want to take a security engineer or an architect who has no interest in, whatever it might be, and put them on all those projects. It's really trying to help use your team to the best of their abilities.
Yeah, that is definitely leveraging the interests of the team when you're building that out. The other thing that I try to do is I try to encourage the teammates to take some, and it depends on the team, what capability and bandwidth we have, but I try to get them to spend one day a sprint, where most of the teams are working on 2-week sprints. One day a sprint is their training day. And that may mean different things for different folks. They may be, attending a class, they may be reading articles, they may be doing something else related to advancing their career and advancing their capabilities. And it built that into the resource model so that those staff are staying up to date and are staying ahead of the emerging technology.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that. Certainly agree with what everybody said. And based on the last point, one of the things that I found helpful is when they work as a team. So when there's an incident, everybody's working as a team. Everybody's engaged and exposed to what's happening. And if there's something that you don't quite understand, it builds that curiosity. And so if you're trying to solve a problem and you don't know how to solve it and you got to go research it, it increases the likelihood that analyst is going to look to see, well, how can I solve this problem? And so you keep them engaged and you have them work as a team, and then you cross-train them, then that will constantly bring those talents up to speed. For every incident that occurs, is going to build their confidence. And of course, it's a great day when your analyst finds the bad guy and it becomes bragging rights. And so have them engaged and work as a team, I find works quite well.
Yeah, great comments, fellas. Anybody else on this question?
Yeah, just real quick. I don't know that any one person can keep up with everything. So, for me, we all as CISOs assign certain areas of the technology stack to different people. And obviously there's probably some rubric around why we've assigned them. My expectation is that they're always looking for better ways to leverage new technologies in their functional domain for the betterment of the company. And to say it another way, I really want most of our research to be really mission focused on what do we need, because you can really get lost in the sauce and try to keep up with everything, and at the end of the day, it becomes overwhelming. So focus on those functional areas that you need to support the business, and obviously, all those need to be very mission relevant. That would be my 2 cents on that, Michael.
Yeah, and mission relevant kind of points to aligning, your goals with the organizational goals, right? And if you've had an opportunity to kind of do a really mature, professional development piece, the PMP they used to call it, I think, you would definitely pull down some of those objectives and then, do derivatives of them into your team's goals as well. One of the things I found is really, convincing the team that their PMP was not my responsibility. It was theirs, right? That once a year view at what was going on was not working. I challenged them all to bring me in once a quarter and talk about the things that we had in their development track and how they were progressing, because priorities change on a regular basis, right? If we're waiting once a year to go back and revisit, I'm going to forget half the things that we did, and so are they. And that's not a fair marker. So I challenged them all to, bring it to me on a quarterly basis, bring to me the things that have happened, that have changed. Let's track it interactively. I mean, it's their skills, not mine, right? And most of them are developing skills that are transportable, not just for that organization and where they're working today, but if they want to continue to enhance themselves as professionals and then become, executive leadership, they have to do things that maybe is not under the purview of what I have there. I had one challenge with working in financial services most of the time. Folks typically get accustomed to having a bonus as part of their annual variable income. And one time I held it back from someone after I asked them like 3 times. I said, listen, I really need you to get this certification. And every year for 3 years, it was like, well, I was too busy. And I knew they weren't. They just didn't want to get the certification. And one year when the bonus time came around, I said, yeah, I held you back a little bit because, we talked about this 3 different times this year, that I may potentially do that. And they were very frustrated with me, but got that certification within 4 months, within that quarter, got that certification, got the cost of the certification paid by us, got the certification, and then became much more valuable to the organization. And then when they left, they were able to request a higher salary as well. So really just getting my teams to understand that, the more they enhance themselves, the better they enhance the team. And those transportable skills that they have are just invaluable when they take them someplace else as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it's not only just we do it for professional development on our own, but we do it for a larger purpose, right? To help the greater community, which I think that's where I see this really coming into play. And one of the best ways that I stay up to speed is just by talking to other people in the tribe in terms of like, hey, what's working? What are you doing? If there's a current event like the solar winds thing, I can't wait to have a conversation with a peer about that, to just find out, hey, what do you think about that? What happened there? What are your thoughts, and what worked and what didn't work? And so, and it's a never ending thing for us. That's why we're part of, professional development groups. We have these seminars and stuff. We're always learning, especially in our industry. So great insights there, fellas. Let's go ahead and move to the next question, question 3. Okay, so we talked a lot about, empowering the teams, building really good teams, and obviously we're delivering, high value services to the business. So how do we manage and report on the effectiveness of our services and our programs with regards to cybersecurity? Some people say we're throwing a lot of money at a problem. We can't really put our finger on how well we're doing. There's breaches everywhere. So how do you guys communicate kind of the overall performance of your programs and functions to your businesses and organizations?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'll take this one first. I learned this really great metric from Michael Phillips today, and I love it. Right, it's the mean time until the eyes glass over. Right, which is a very, very creative way of saying it depends on your audience. And for me, I have a very technical board, so I can take some technical metrics to them. But there are a lot of executives and boards that aren't like that. What I found over the course of my time at ReliQuest, the questions that we get from boards are typically around literally 6 areas, and I've never found a question that wasn't within these 6 areas. They're either around the latest threat. Right, so something happens. I'm sure every one of us had an inquiry about SolarWinds, right, or whatever got published in the Washington Post or New York Times. They're related to risk, like, hey, what are our most vulnerable areas? What are you worried about? These are the types of things that you may get. They're related around investment. Where should we spend more money? If you had $1 to spend, where would you spend it? They're related to, in some cases, compliance. Depending on the nature of the business. They're related to maturity. How are we doing? How are we doing against our peers, right? Or they want comparison, right? And those are kind of related in a way. So something around threat, risk, investment, compliance, maturity, comparison. I've not seen any questions that someone's ever asked me that didn't fall into one of those 6 categories. Now, when you break that down, now we get into whether how do you answer those questions depends on the nature of your board. And I could talk all day long about certain metrics that can be used, but some boards are very risk centric. They don't really want to know how you're doing. They want to know what you're doing to keep this from happening. My board tends to be risk centric. Not all boards are risk centric. Some are very compliance centric, where sometimes IT and security is more of a utility. I think that's becoming less and less of the case. But at the end of the day, if you're risk-based, you're going to talk to your board about things to reduce the probability of bad things from happening, or things to reduce the impact should something happen. And then you get into metrics around investment, and I won't go into all the metrics, but at the end of the day, you can be measuring risk. You can be measuring all the things that have to do with probability. You could get into vulnerability and normalize that. How many vulnerabilities by host. You can get into phishing metrics. I've seen all kinds of metrics here. But I'll pause and say those are the 6 areas. And depending on your board, you're going to pick ways to communicate to them. Some want stories, some want numbers. And I'll pause there, Mike. I'd love to hear from some of my other colleagues. Over.
John, I definitely agree with what you're saying. I also notice on the business side, a lot of the business don't really understand cybersecurity. They don't understand what we do. There's an idea, but they really don't understand it. And I've come across that several times. And part of what I've tried to do to communicate exactly what you just mentioned is to create some sort of scorecard, maybe a monthly scorecard reporting exactly the things that you just mentioned. So where are we with compliance? And sort of do like a traffic light, red, green, yellow. In terms of incidents, how many incidents? They may not even understand the number of incidents that the organization is experiencing. Realizing that, let's say, in a university or higher ed, type organization, and especially if you're doing research, you probably got the nation state on that network trying to get all your stuff, and the business doesn't really understand that. And so if we can somehow bring a scorecard or some sort of program or system that illustrates what we do and puts it in a language that they understand, I find that is really helpful.
Yeah, definitely agree. I mean, we got to be able to communicate that value, because the business can really do near to nothing without the data, right? And the data being available. So it's a critical function. John S. or Barry, any thoughts or comments here on how you guys are managing this, either from the cloud perspective? John S. or Barry, kind of relatively new in the role. Were you presented a scorecard and said, hey, this is how we're doing as you're taking over here, good luck? Just kind of curious what your insights are in kind of real world experience.
Certainly would have loved to have been presented with one, but that wasn't how that started. But we is very, everything we're doing is very metric driven, and conveniently the cloud gives you that capability to really dive deep in what's happening and pull all those metrics together. But I think, like John said, you have to be able to take those metrics and tell the story that the board is asking for in the way that they want to consume it. So whether that is this is our measure of current risk, and this is our value in mitigating that risk or mitigating the impact of that type of breach. If that's what they're looking for, or if they are looking for that more technical, this is how many attempts we had, how many were reported. This is where they got access or didn't get access. This is what was exposed or not exposed. It really depends on that and on the audience, but it needs to be driven in data. It needs to be pulled from the metrics that you're capturing. And if you're not capturing it, like with anything, you can't make it better. You can't improve it. So.
And I'll just kind of reiterate what John B said. Is it really depends on what your board is interested in, and just figuring out a way to make sure that you're addressing whatever their concerns are. I've had to report to teams who have been solely interested in compliance. The question was, are we PCI compliant? Yes or no? We are. Great. Okay, we'll talk to you next quarter. Or now it's a little bit different. So really just figuring out what's important. What are the concerns of the board?
That's great input. Yeah, definitely. I was just typing something in the chat. So was Target on your PCI compliant comment. So, yeah, because compliance and security are two completely different things. But there's a reason that the business needs to know. The other thing I think that's important here is we got to leverage automation and some of the analytic power that technology can bring, because I've been parts of these metric programs that grow out of control, where you've got at the end of the quarter you've got a 87 slide presentation and you have a 3-hour meeting and you don't get past slide 6 and there's like 200 man hours that goes into building the presentation. So don't want it to get to that point either. We're just collecting all this data and not really making any decisions around it, which is really what we should be doing, is informing the decision makers in that.
Hey, Mike, you raised a great point. If I can just elaborate really quickly. I have clients across manufacturing, refineries, and financial services. Financial services are highly regulated. And so their regulators tell them what should be in the board report. So we have a different challenge, and that is we have to explain to them why what the regulator is telling us to report on is relevant to them. And that's another thing. I mean, you can bring the metric in there, but make sure you're digging into why it's relevant, or even why the regulator may think it's relevant. And then not just a whole bunch of, just points, but bring in the points that are relevant based on what they're asking for and explain why it's important. I think John did a great job of that earlier. It really comes out to how likely and how the impact may affect them as an organization, very specific risk to that organization, what that organization does.
Yeah, I agree. I captured the 6 areas of performance measurement. I thought those were great. Kind of the pillars there. You can build any program around depending on, focus of what the stakeholders want to see and what they want to hear about. So that was great. Let's move on to the next question. Might be an audience question, I think. Nope. Okay, so what are some challenges and best practice? So asset and data management, now we get, controlling the estate, right? And sprawl and, what are we actually protecting? Where is there a perimeter? Is there not a perimeter? Is everybody a bad guy, zero trust? What are some challenges and best practices you have found to manage things like shadow IT, hybrid cloud, and data sprawl across your environment? And I'll just open this up to the group. Probably our last question. We've got about 10 minutes left in the session, so let's have some discussion around this.
This is one we just were talking about the other day, and it's a difficult question when you get into, there's 30, 40, 50,000 people that are a part of your environment. Managing their them are going out and signing up for a SaaS service and sending company data out somewhere or building a cloud environment. It takes a good communication with your accounting and your business to make sure that there's not a path to pay for something with company funds that's not part of the approved process. So making sure that if an expense report comes back with a SaaS service or with a cloud service or with some outside IT that didn't come through the appropriate process, that we're identifying that we're going through and remediating that, because the ability of an individual currently to go out and spin up a service, it's so easy, it's so fast, and data can leave the environment and so quickly. You need to be, from every perspective, you need to be looking for that, and it requires the whole organization to look at it, not just the security department.
I definitely agree with that, John. It's been a real challenge, especially with higher ed and COVID, with people working remotely. A user may not even think about it that, hey, let me just use my own services or my own Dropbox or my own printer, and not realizing by doing that, they're introducing risk to the organization. So one of the ways that we try to mitigate those risks is to increase visibility, have more sensors, just watch almost everything, and try to ensure that everybody who's working remotely has an asset that is owned by the organization. And if they don't have an asset owned by the organization, then we have to increase whatever visibility, maybe have a knack to ensure that you have all the proper controls in it to get onto our network. Definitely have DLP to look at that data, make sure that the data is not leaving without proper authorization. So it certainly is a challenge, but it's also, it's something that we can actually mitigate, and we're doing that on a consistent basis right now.
Yeah, I would say my best practice for you got to make IT and security easy. And my approach on this is get risk partners in the game. So my chief marketing officer, right, my chief revenue officer, like I can show them the functional, impact analysis of things that could go wrong in their area. And if you get them to be risk partners with you, I think, you can't stop the business from doing what it needs to do. What you can do is you can mitigate the risks, but you can only really do that if you get risk partners in the game. And the best way I've found to do that is engage them and show them, hey, here's how we measure the risk. Here's the things you can do. Here's the things my team will help with. And you get the risk partner in the game. That's the approach that I've taken here. It's not perfect, but I find when you try to beat them with the governance stick, you're just not going to get too far. Over.
Yeah, definitely. I'll weigh in there because I mean I've got a personal experience. You know, something that was relatively shocking to me. You know, working with an executive in an organization, a large organization, who was a risk owner, who was approving risk exceptions in Archer, who had no idea that they were the risk owner and they were approving exceptions in Archer, even what they even meant, or you know, it was just the security teams were sending them over. They were just approving them. And yeah, hey, I need this data. The business has got to go. Nobody was assessing the risk. The security teams thought, oh, great, they're signing off on the risk. Risk owner thought, oh, great, security's assessing the risk, and this they're recommending we implement. You know, and it was just somewhere in the middle. So communication is kind of important there too, with regards to identifying your risk ownership, and then empowering those risk owners to make security-minded decisions. I think that's where we can.
Yeah, Mike, I found communication for me has been really the most important tool. Keeping those lines of communication open with my peers, and asking why. And not why for the sake of, maybe some type of follow-up action, but why for the sake of the business. Why are you going out and looking at bringing on a hybrid cloud service? And, if we can find out that they're doing it because we're not able to provide that capability, well, that's a completely different discussion, right? But communication is the key.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely agree. We're coming down on time here. We've got just a few minutes left. I think there is one audience question. We can maybe take a quick stab at that and then wrap up here in the next 3 to 4 minutes. Gabby, do we have a question from the audience?
There's a bunch of questions we have.
Oh, cool.
Just one.
Well, can you pick one?
Pressure. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you pick one, so I don't have to be that.
You're killing me, guys.
Chooser here.
Okay. Knowing what you know now, this is a good question. Knowing what you know now, what would you change to help someone starting out as a cyber professional thinking about becoming a CISO? And I'm sure you guys are doing this day to day in your mentoring and your leadership development that you're doing with your teams. But what is that advice? Those couple of key points that you pass along as advice to say, hey, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if this is the goal, that's great. But, in order to get here, these are the habits that you need. These are the goals that you should be setting for yourselves. How do you guys share that knowledge kind of as the Jedi masters of your respective organizations?
I think a very important thing is to frame the security problems and challenges that you're looking at in relation to how they affect the business. That's important it's not about security for security's sake. It's about security for enabling the business's sake. And so if you frame your research and your study in that frame, it'll be a lot easier for you to communicate with the business, which will put you in the place. If your goal is to be a CISO, that's how you drive yourself there.
I agree. If you want to be an effective CISO, you got to understand the business as well as the other executives. It's the reason why most CISOs, many CISOs, not all, don't get a seat at the table is because they can't relate to the business and what their function does. The only other thing I'd say to this question is that at the core of every leadership position is leadership. So it's a key piece, and don't underestimate how important it is. Over.
Yeah, I'd also like to offer understanding the why, just making sure that whoever it is that you're mentoring or working with understands why they want to become a CISO in the first place. There's a number of reasons that you might, and not all of them are good. So really just having that thorough understanding of why. And also, the role of CISO changes. So I can only speak to, why you might want to be a CISO today. I think all of us have seen the role of a CISO change over the last 3 years, over the last 5 years. And it's likely that, in the next 5 years, it's going to look very different again.
Yes, I agree with everybody here. And I guess I would emphasize, why? Why do you want to be a CISO? And I think it was Larry who had a presentation on, do you really want to be a CISO? And that was a great presentation. And I would recommend if whoever is interested in that should probably get a copy of those slide decks, because it really goes into the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Michael, any final comments on that?
A perspective from a virtual CISO, no two organizations are the same. None are the same. No boards are the same. It's different everywhere you go. Understand that you're the asset, right? And align your talents with what you think you can do for an organization, but also know that some organizations will chew you up and spit you out. The tenure of a CISO is about 18 months in most organizations. And it is changing. The field is changing rapidly. I see so many fractional and virtual CISOs now because many SMBs cannot afford that price tag. And then many of the CISOs really need to understand, I think Guy pointed this out, the risk to the business. If the business is not there, there's no IT. If the IT is not there, there's no cyber risk. If there's no cyber risk, I don't need a CISO. So kind of, look at it from that perspective and just know, you're the asset, build your talent so that you can do what you want to do. And after CISO, there's life after CISO, trust me. So be ready for that too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Gabby, I'll turn it over to you. I just have some final comments. I think we are at time. I want to thank the panelists for just getting some background noise here, but I want to thank the panelists for your time today, gentlemen. That was phenomenal insights. It was great to have the discussion with you around this. For the audience members, thanks for your time. Thanks for your attention. I'll tell you too, another key to success in this industry is your network. So, there's some folks on the left-hand side of the panel here, that you just listened to for an hour. So maybe shoot them a note, tell them thanks if you learned something or you want to talk more, including myself or anybody else that you met today on the conference. I do want to thank Gabby, the whole entire team. There's an army of volunteers that pulled this off, so that we were able to kind of sit here and talk. So certainly appreciate them, appreciate the sponsors, and appreciate everybody behind the first virtual B-Sides for Tampa. And I think John said it best: if we can't support our backyard, then how good are we as security professionals? So, Gabby, I'll turn it over to you. Any closing comments or anything we need to do to clean up here?
Speakers: John, Mike, and Mike.
Okay. I guess not. Let's get out of here then. Nothing heard. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time and have a wonderful rest of the conference. We have the keynote coming up at the top of the hour.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Thanks all.